How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I've got a very special guest for you all. I don't think there's anything that this man can't do. He's been a personal trainer, gym owner, businessman, he's a published author. Today, I am joined by the one and only Vince Gabriel. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, brother. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. How are you? What's been happening in your world recently?
All is good. I mean, my life is busy right now. I've run a few different companies and try to keep, track of the same health and fitness. I actually just got back from an ultra marathon doing that, and
Oh.
I've never run a marathon. I've never run a race in my entire life, and I decided to start with an ultra marathon through the woods. I just got back from that, so my body's still feeling it. But
Nice.
that's
And
what's been new.
where was that at?
It was in Pennsylvania. It's called the Green Monster, and it's 30, so it's at 50K
Oh wow.
through the mountains and woods, and it's poured rain the whole time. But it was a great experience for sure.
Yeah. Oh, nice. What made you want to do an ultra marathon if you've not done one before?
Yeah, so I read a book probably a couple years ago called The Comfort Crisis,
Oh
and
yeah.
it talks about a thing called Masogi in there. And what a Masogi is basically like you pick one thing a year that's like really hard and challenging for you to do. And there's a bunch of criteria, but it's like there's supposed to be like a 50% failure rate on it, right?
Right.
So a lot of people that did that ultra marathon, they were like some of these people were doing this all the time. Like, and I've never done it before. So for me, it was like a Masogi. For them, it probably wasn't.
Yeah.
So I try to do one thing a year that like is kind of defining for me. And it's been really cool, man. It's been a really
Yeah.
cool experience to think about what I want to do and plan and just takes your, focus and drive to a whole nother level. So
Yeah.
it's great. And there's a guy named Jesse Itzler that talks about Misogi a lot. And he's a guy I respect and follow. So he's
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, nice. That's on. So I listen to quite a lot of books on Audible, and that's actually on my
Yeah.
save list.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Um,
cool. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So when you mentioned it, it's funny. Earlier on this week, someone had mentioned it to me. My girlfriend had read it. She's got the actual physical book, but when I'm driving to and from the gym, to and from training, I put it on in the car. And a couple of members have asked. So yeah, it's in my to do list. So yeah, I'll have to give that a read because a couple of people have mentioned that. Um,
Yeah, it's a great one.
I did quite a brief introduction to you, Vince, but for everyone listening who might not know your background
Yeah.
into your own business, gyms, training, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself.
Yeah, so started my athletic career. I played football at Temple University and was a very poor, washed up offensive lineman. I was about 300 pounds when I played football, so I realized that my pipe dreams to go to the NFL that never really existed. Um, were finished, and I was 300 pounds, and I was like, I got to lose some weight. And so my journey into the fitness industry started with my own weight loss quest, as I think a lot of people do. And I ended up losing, I think, 70 pounds in 4 months or something like that. And I got into it. Like I got the bug of like working out and I'm reading all the different magazines and stuff like that. And I ended up getting that year. I was majoring in business at the time, so it wasn't planned, but it ended up totally pivoting and changing careers and becoming a personal trainer. And my father was in the finance industry and he patted me. I said, I'm not going to go into the business world. I'm going to go be a personal trainer. And he, patted me on the top of the head and said, good luck, son. Um, but it was something I just loved. And at that point in time in my early 20s, I had a passion for fitness and stuff. So I moved to San Diego from Philly and got a job as a personal trainer and kind of like many of your listeners and you, I think, like you started with just grinding and training 50, 60, 70 sessions a week and getting experience and growing. And I've got to the point where I'm like, okay, I did this for 5 years. I think it's time for me to go off on my own. I moved back to New Jersey, where I'm from originally, and opened my gym with my wife. Actually, I met my wife in the gym that I worked with out in San Diego, and
Ah.
we got married and moved a Cali girl back to New Jersey with me, which was maybe my biggest accomplishment. Everyone always asks, "How the hell did you get her to move from California to New Jersey?" Um, but we did, and yeah, we've been married 17 years and had the gym for pretty much the same amount of time. Have three kids, and um, so yeah, that's pretty much the story. And then I, ran the gym for a long time, and that's really what my focus was, is just running the business and running the gym. And we did a combo of athletes and adults. We had probably, for a large part of the business, 50% of our, business was sports performance, and the other sport part was personal training.
Yeah,
And we did pretty good. We did well, and we started to get some people interested in what I was doing from a business side, and it kind of started with some private coaching. Yeah, can you help me out? And I, get on the phone with people, tell them what to do. And I didn't really know what to do at the time. I just told them what we were doing. I was like, this is working, so
yeah,
we'll just do this. And that, turned into a whole nother business. Now it's my largest business is, it's a mastermind business coaching company for gym owners from all
yeah,
around the world. We actually have clients in the UK. Um, and so I started that company, and then on the back of that, we started a digital marketing agency where we build websites and run ads for gyms. That's called Kiss Marketing. So
yeah.
that's kind of the very, very quick story of like what where we're at today. But most of my time is spent helping gym owners build a better business.
Yeah, nice, cool. And with that, I suppose, kind of diving into the first couple of topics that I had in mind, really. You mentioned there, wanting to be a personal trainer and then gravitating towards being a gym owner, and then helping other gym owners become successful. How how did you find that transition, and how has that kind of helped you help other gym owners, if that makes sense? Because I know, from my perspective, from other coaches, other gym owners, you kind of, for a long time, have this personal trainer head in terms of how can I get
Yeah.
results for clients, how can I, make them stay consistent, and then all of a sudden, when it comes to, owning an actual brick and mortar, facility, there's other things that you need to think of. And sometimes, I know for some people it can be hard to flick between those two. What was kind of your experience of that in terms of that transition, and then how have you found that helping, the people that you work with now?
Yeah, I got kind of lucky. One of my mentors was a guy named Mike Boyle, who you might have heard of. And
Yeah, yeah,
I had a meeting with him, and he told me to read this book called The E-Myth Revisited before I even opened my gym. And basically what the book kind of talks about is there's the technician, right, which is the person that does the work, and then there's the owner, the person that kind of runs the business, right? And so I kind of got an early glimpse of, all right, I can't run this company with a trainer mind.
yeah,
And I kind of very quickly got into learning and reading books about business probably sooner than most, which may read me. And I think I just got really lucky. I think
yeah,
sometimes it takes people a little longer. I think I just got really lucky that I read that book early, and I was like, it made sense to me that I'm not going
yeah,
to grow past. But I will say this is that I wrote a short, real little book called The Four Stages of Fitness Business Success. And I kind of ran through it's a real short book, but it runs through each stage. And there's like this stage one period where you're like, how should I say it? You're like LeBron James with four eighth graders on your team, right? And you're playing and you're kicking everyone's ass because LeBron is on the team,
yeah,
right? But if LeBron's sick that day, like that, and they bring in another eighth grader to take LeBron's place, like they are not the same team.
yeah,
And so that stage one is where like you're kind of doing everything. You're doing all the sessions. You're trying to, manage that one part-time trainer you got. Maybe you have an admin, maybe you don't. But there's this massive amount of energy that has to go into succeeding. And I believe each of these stages, there's a certain skill set that needs to be learned.
Yeah.
And in the very, very beginning, the skill set that needs to be learned is how do you get your next customer? And I think a lot of people make this mistake of and I made this mistake too.
Yeah.
Um, and partly because of, so sometimes the E-Myth messed me up, right? I spent a lot of time my first year in business writing these big, big systems manuals, which was a huge mistake.
Right.
Because when you have a systems manual, you're assuming that you now have people to delegate it to. And in the beginning, you usually don't have anyone to delegate it to. What the hell do you need a systems manual for? Right. And I spent too much time on that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Probably too much time on the product, probably too much time trying to make it perfect and not enough time focusing on where am I going to get my next customer? Because that is the ticket to get from stage one to stage two is ringing the register, is making money because growth comes when you can pull yourself out.
Yeah.
And you can't pull yourself out if you can't afford to hire anybody to train any of the sessions.
Yeah.
So stage one is all about, all right, how do you acquire customers? And I don't know if it's like, because I know your audience is I think gym owners, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people like that, right? And I don't think it's about, becoming like a funnel wizard or learning how to really be really good on Facebook. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about community.
Mm.
Like when you're starting, like creating relationships with people in your community and going, I'm not saying you shouldn't run ads like we run ads for people that do a pre-sale and stuff like that, but I didn't do any of that stuff. I didn't do when I started, I didn't do any of that stuff. It was all relationship building. And I think that that's what people got to understand is that the time that they spend going out and knocking on doors and partnering with salons and, getting other people to bring them in to speak and all things like that is what is going to really grow your reputation and grow your business in the very beginning. So when I say you need to be able to acquire customers, I don't think you need to be a marketing guru.
Yeah.
I think what you really need to do is just understand and learn what are the things you need to do to acquire new customers. And sometimes that's knocking on doors and just creating relationships with the right people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like stage one, and that's the skill set you need. Now, stage two, it's you're shifting from kind of doing everything to now you got a small team. And this is always a big shift for people. It's like, all right, now I have to, pay people. Well, how do I do that? Right? Now I have to actually, if they, what do I say if they ask me for a raise? Or how should I give them health insurance? Do I not give it? And so I think that there's this whole leading and managing people skill set.
Yeah.
And that's really the next thing and doesn't mean you stop acquiring new customers. It doesn't mean that you stop training clients. I think in stage two, people are still going to be training, some people. Um, but it really means you need to start getting your head around the leadership and management. With this stage for me is when I got really into the Patrick Lencioni stuff. Um, he wrote a book called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, which was really helpful for me at the time. But it kind of that stage, that second stage where it's like you and like three full-time trainers and like one admin and like that like small unit is really cool. But if you don't know how to lead and manage those people, they're probably going to leave or they're going to find better opportunities or they're going to hate you. Like it's just like this the skill set you need to develop
Yeah.
is that. And then hopefully you do that well, and then you pop into stage three, which is kind of more of like you're running an organization
Yeah.
and you're the CEO, right? You're the person that is leading more than doing.
Yeah.
You're doing more thinking. You're doing more, um, building up and trying to recruit and hire the best people to run different departments. So this is where someone might have a salesperson. This is where someone might have like a full-time operations person or what we call a facility leader, which is someone that's kind of running the day-to-day of the business. But that's kind of the third level is more of you're in that CEO seat. A lot of times I see people and I recommend people staying in the marketing seat because I think the marketing is just such an important thing to do. Um, And then the last stage is scaling. That's where a lot of my guys in my group are scaling to multiple locations. And now you have, trying to find one key person to run a gym for you, and your job becomes leading that person, but also learning how to make decisions based on data. Like
Yeah.
you can't, when you have multiple locations, you can't run yourself on emotion. You have to go by what actually is happening from the number standpoint. So
Yeah.
that's a very quick snapshot of it. But the point in all of this is there is a skill set that you don't know that you need to learn to be able to break off and move to the next level of each stage.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what stands in the way. It's not, I don't think it's like this talent thing. Like I, I often tell my coaching clients, I was like, all of you probably got better SAT scores than me, right? All of you are probably smarter than me. And the reality is what you really need, you're a skill set away. It's like, what do
Yeah.
you need to, you need to learn sales? Okay, go out and learn sales. Everything that you need is in your disposal. Go hire someone to teach you how to do it. You need to learn leadership, go figure it out how to do it. You need to learn how to scale a business, go figure it out. You can figure it out. So a lot of times what stands in the way is just a simple skill set.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of times from there, it was kind of the end product, stages 3 and 4, where, like what you mentioned, decisions are being based off data. You said there about the systems being in place. If you're doing everything, why do you need systems? Whereas when you've got people in place, that's when you can actually start thinking about, right, let's actually put systems in place. Do you think that that's where maybe when people are looking to first open facilities that they're thinking of that end product rather than what actually probably made them successful as a trainer at the start is that skill set of building relationships with people. Even if you've got a team, or you get to stage 2 and you've got a team, you still have to build a relationship to work with that team. Do you think that's where maybe people fall down a little bit and struggle to get to that end phase where they are thinking more of how to progress forward rather than like the day-to-day running of things, because they're starting at stage 4, whereas actually they need to think about that stage 1 and 2 first. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. I think one of the most important questions, and it's funny, I just looked at my board and that question is written down for me. And the question is, what's most important right now?
Hmm.
And I think that that's what people have to ask themselves all the time. It's like, where am I in my business? And maybe you don't know the answer to it. So maybe you need to ask someone else what's most important right now. For me, I run a mastermind called the CEO Mastermind, where I bring in 12 guys, pretty high level spreadsheets, P&Ls, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
deep dive 4 times a year. And one of the questions I want them asking is this: what don't I see? What am I
Yeah.
not seeing? Because a lot of times in your business, you cannot see. You're like in the trenches, you're in there. There's a lot of things that are happening where someone from the outside can come in and be so obvious and make such an obvious thing of, well, this is not working right here. You need to
Yeah.
change this. And we're stuck in our business, so we can't see it. But you got to be wrestling with the question of what's most important right now. And I think in the early stages, and I can simplify this as much as possible. And this is not really just for early stages. This is it, and it's the premise of the current book that I'm writing. And its business can be broken down into 3 categories: getting clients, keeping clients, and building cash. And everything that you need to do for your company is in those 3 categories.
Yeah.
And I think in the beginning, there's not as much of a focus on getting clients and keeping clients. They're worried about the plants. They're worried about all this other stuff, except what did I do today to get another client? What did I do today to keep the clients I got?
Yeah.
What did I do today to improve my cash position from an operational and a financial standpoint? And that's really, the basis of the entire thing. So I try to simplify stuff. We have the head business coach for my company is a guy named Joe Hashi, and he's one of the most incredible humans in the world, but he has an unbelievable job of keeping things really, really simple. And so that's kind of the book I'm working on now. But it's just like if you could just narrow down of like getting clients, keeping clients, building cash, everything that you need to do is under one of those categories. And I know that's kind of a broad stroke of it, but for someone starting out, if you just show up to your work today and just like, all right, what do I need to do to get new clients? What do I need to do to keep clients? And if you just focus on that and not all the minutia stuff that probably doesn't matter, and you're results based and results focused, you're probably going to be in a good spot. You're probably going to grow pretty quickly.
Yeah, nice. And I think the two main things there to kind of touch on, which is something that I speak about with the trainers that I work with and train, is when we're looking at trying to get clients and retain clients. Is that kind of like 50-50 all the time, or is one always going to sway more than the
Good
other?
question.
Because
Yeah,
sometimes people are always wanting to if you're pouring more things into a leaky bucket, it's going to hard to
yep.
then scale from there. So how do you kind of approach that with the people that you're working with and the strategies that you use?
Great question. When we bring a new gym owner into our world, the first thing we teach them is something called the scoreboard. And when you don't have a scoreboard, you don't know the score, and you can't tell the winners from the losers.
Yeah,
And that's like that was like a big thing for a long time. It's just like, how do you know if you're winning in business? And this tells you if you're winning in business. And so a scoreboard is a list of you could call them critical drivers, leading indicators, whatever you want, but it's like on a weekly basis, what are the most important data points that when these data points are on track, meaning they're aligned with a goal that you have set and you're hitting them on a weekly basis, the money will take care of itself.
yeah,
And so to answer your question of which one do you focus on, well, you focus on what's off track.
yeah,
So, for example, if you come in and you sit down with your team and you had a goal of 15 leads and you got five, if that continues week after week after week, you will not hit your client goal.
yeah,
I promise you won't. Right. And so that tells you what to focus on. Or if there's a period of a couple of weeks where you're like, wait a minute, our attrition is normally 3%. It's now been 8% the last 3 weeks. Like, what's going on here? Right.
yeah,
Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have stuff in place. You should always have stuff that's in place in retention. And some of it is about building it into your systems, right? It shouldn't be about like running and putting out fires every day. And sometimes what the data points tell you to do is create better systems to be able to do this. So, an example is if you're having a retention issue, and you could say, all right, well, how do we know when people are going to actually leave? Well, people, you know that by when they stop showing up,
yeah,
right? If they're not showing up, they're eventually going to quit. And so tracking attendance is like, got to be, it can't be something that you do when you feel like you're off track. It's got to be a baked into your business system. Every week, we're tracking attendance, and the people that aren't coming, we're going to give them a call and be like, "Hey, where the hell are you? You're going to miss your work." Because if that it continues, they will quit,
yeah,
guaranteed.
yeah,
So some of it is bad, but the scoreboard kind of tells you what to do. The conversion rates, right? If all of a sudden we had 10 consultations and only one new client, I'm like, well, what the hell's going on in the consultation?
yeah,
Why aren't we converting these people? We're getting leads, we're getting consultations, and we're sitting down with them. And is it the price? Is it what we're saying to them? Is it the salesperson? Like, what is it? And that's the problem that you need to solve. So the data drives the decisions,
yeah.
and that's how you would know.
Yeah. And I suppose from what you've said there, it's kind of I can't think the phrase that I'm looking for, but it's kind of like the logical solution. You can't hide away from kind of like the facts, if you like. If that's happening, right,
Yeah.
you need to go on there. Whereas sometimes, well, kind of two follow up questions from there is, do you think that that's where the when we're actually running a gym, because when you look at other businesses that have that kind of maybe respect, if you like, whereas as a gym, it can be something that people will drop in and drop out of. They don't see it as something that potentially they're going to um, uh, treat like a business, if you like. And do you think why by using these data points, that's how it becomes and is seen as more professional and as more that they've got those systems in place to be able to make those decisions and be a little bit more based off the data, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think a couple points there. I think one of the things is how they're brought into the business is a big indicator of how long they stay. I think that that's one of the most underestimated things in business is that when you kind of almost quick sell people into a membership and you don't take the time in the very beginning to understand what they want, to understand what success looks like to them, to have a proper onboarding system that indoctrinates them into your world. I think the absence of something like that is par for a leaky bucket of
Yeah.
clients. And so I think that that's a really important point of the value is because your question is about how do I make this a real thing, like a value thing. So part of this is linking it to something that's beyond, a very like lukewarm goal of losing weight.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we do in our consultations is we try to figure out why.
Mhm.
Like, why do they want to get fit? Why do they want to come to a gym? And the big thing I probably 10 years ago now, we had a woman named Kathy Balsamo who came in and she, ended up losing 82 pounds and she was like our
Oh,
spokesperson for the
yeah.
for a decade, right? And I sat down with her and I started asking her all these questions. I was just like, and we got to a root reason of like, all right, why do you want to lose this weight? And it was, I want to be a role model for my kids and other people
Yeah.
to be able to help them get fit. So her purpose was strong. And I think that she ended up, impacting, I don't want to say hundreds, right? But
Yeah.
many dozens of lives
Yeah.
based on her example. And it kind of got connected when I asked her what that why was.
Yeah.
Right. Um, so I think that those things, the price is also a factor. If something is too cheap, a lot of times people think, oh, I just got to lower my prices and more people will come. But sometimes, a lot of times high price is associated with what? The best,
Yeah.
right? Like we had there's a story I always tell of like my wife and I were going on vacation and we were like packing and we went upstairs. And you know how like animals get all weird when you leave on vacation?
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden the cat dropped a huge deuce right in the middle of our bed. And like it was like 11 o'clock at night and we're like ready to go to sleep. I'm dog tired. And this cat dropped a deuce. I'm like, all right, like we're not sleeping on this thing tonight. So he threw it out and Vanessa sent me to the store to go get a down comforter to get a new one.
Yeah.
And I never bought a down comforter before. I don't know what a good one is, what a bad one is. And I looked at the prices and one was 50, one was 70, one was 90. And I was like, oh, I'm just gonna get the 90. That's probably the best one.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people, so sometimes your price, right, is a good thing. Your price being high can make people to your question of what makes people value this, what's made people stick, what makes people not think that this is something they should come in and out of. Those are a couple factors. But here's the thing, understand this, there's always going to be attrition. There's not a gym in the world
Yeah.
that doesn't have attrition, right? But
Mhm.
it's about minimizing it as much as you possibly can. I want to make one more point about what you said about, and because I think you brought in a really important thing is that we talked about this data thing, and the data helps you run your business in reality world.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of business owners run their business on emotion.
Yeah.
And that's a really bad way to run your business and honestly to run your life.
Yeah.
And so the more people can get a grip on reality and the truth teller in your business is the data.
Mhm.
That is what if your business would talk, that's what it would say. It would say the numbers. And I think that one of the things I teach people as much as I possibly can is like to how to be in touch with reality and know that, hey, just because one client told you that your thing is too expensive and they're probably going to leave, does not mean that every one of your clients is going to follow them and leave.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think so. Or if you decide to raise your prices and one person comes back and says, "How could you do this? You're a greedy bastard. How could you raise your prices on me? You're just in this for the money." And one person says that to you, and you go into this basket case because, oh my God, how did I do this? Right? But that's not looking at you. How many members do you have? I have 150. How many people said that? One. Data would say that that's not a problem.
Hmm. Yeah.
But our emotions is like, oh my God, this person called me a pig. Like, what am I going to do? So I think that as much as possible, you got to run your business based on reality and
Yeah.
run your life on reality.
Hmm.
Here's the other
Yeah.
thing too. Like, there's not a person in the world, and not a business, especially not a business in the world, that doesn't have any kind of problems.
Yeah.
And going through your life and thinking and almost being shocked when you have a problem is like living in fantasy land.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really it's like reality is problems are a part of the living experience.
Yeah.
And when they come, it's your job to be able to deal with them as emotionally level as you possibly can within your ability to do that. And so it's definitely a skill, right? To be able to
Yeah.
do that, but the more people can get a grip on this, um, the better.
Absolutely. It's funny as I was kind of nodding along as what you were saying there. I literally had a conversation. Was it last night or was it this morning? With a client, really, really successful. He runs his own business. He runs like a sales business, and he struggled getting into the gym because there was a couple of issues that he basically had to sort out with work. Came in, he was, oh, I didn't get in last week, and I kind of just said, you probably another week like this is probably going to happen. There's probably going to be other
Yeah.
problems that are going to come up. There's probably going to be a week where you are going to end up traveling around a lot with work, where there are problems. Whereas what I really kind of bought into what you're saying is it's a skill set. If you can manage those problems, it's a skill to have, to be like, okay, well, how can I fix this problem? How can I reduce what's that's happening? Or you've got data to see how you've responded to that problem, and then go from there. Because there's always going to be something. Not everything is going to go to a plan 100% of the time. But like what you mentioned earlier is the data can help you then make decisions and try and be see maybe problems coming up down the line, because with any data you see trends and peaks and troughs and those sorts of things. With that, when you've said about sort of problems and taking things personally, and being in that reality of problems are going to come up, do you think that sometimes holds within the gym setting, holds people back from being successful in business, because they kind of have maybe knee-jerk reactions to small problems, as opposed to being like, well, actually, no, that's okay. I'm gonna focus on this, because that one thing doesn't really matter.
So, um, I don't know if you're a follower of Tony Robbins, but
Yeah.
I am. And, one of the lines I heard him say, and it's just some random video or something, but it stuck with me for a really long time. It's like the number one chokehold on a business is the psychology of the owner.
Yeah.
And, why don't we learn skill sets, right? Why don't like if something as simple as us getting to another level of business is me learning how to lead, why don't we do that? Like, why don't
Yeah.
we learn that skill? It's not a lack of knowledge, and sometimes it's a lack of belief. And so I think that that's like a really big thing that we work on a lot is like the belief patterns that gym owners have and how they feel about themselves and their own self-image and the picture that they have of themselves is like, am I the type of person that can lead a whole team of people? Am I the type of person that can look at a spreadsheet and be able to make decisions based on that thing? So a lot of it comes down to who they are as a person. And I think that that is what I love about business so much. I love business because it is built in personal development. You have to grow. You have to grow. You have no choice. If you're going to grow your company, you have to grow yourself as a person. And if you don't grow yourself as a person, the business growth will stop. There's John Maxwell has the law of the lid, right? The law of the lid is the business will never outgrow the leadership of the owner. And so the bottleneck in all of the companies is us.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be a never-ending quest for becoming better,
Yeah.
right? The best version of you, has to be in this constant quest to try to become the best version of yourself. And if that stops, there's a lot of times the business growth will stop too.
Yeah. And do you think with that, because I am a big believer in that continued development and growth, because I can't remember the phrase exactly, but it's something like you don't want to be the same. The worst position to be in was be the same as last year or last week or whatever else, and trying to learn something and keep going. I think is really important. With how that impacts developing a business, and you've going back to talking about getting clients, retaining clients. Do you think that's where you can end up adding in layers? So, like for example, on the retention side of things, you mentioned about attendance, and then it might be like, oh well, actually, people might have this going on, but then I want to add in another kind of like safety net in terms of retention, and kind of build out the strategies within that business so it becomes you can control those data points a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, the data points are huge. I think that, and I think going back to our reality question is like that's a lot of people don't look at numbers
Hmm.
because they don't want to face reality.
Yeah.
And they don't want to know what it like they don't want to know what a profit and loss statement says.
Yeah.
They like so they just don't look at it at
Yeah.
all. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think it is being able to be comfortable enough with something not being right
Mhm.
and something being totally off track and being comfortable enough to be able to face reality. Dan Sullivan says all progress starts with the truth,
Yeah.
right? And so if you're going to make progress on something, you have to face the reality, and whether that's getting clients, whether that's keeping clients, you understanding and knowing what are the levers that need to be pulled. Um, I don't know if I can curse on here, but
Yeah.
um, someone sent me this the other day, and it says your success is in direct proportion to the amount of times that you say "fuck it, I'll figure it out."
Yeah.
I think that's a really good one. It's just like, no, fuck it, I'll figure it out. I'll figure this out, as opposed to kind of like getting stuck and then just kind of slide. Because I think that's a lot of habit. We kind of get to this point where it's like we're getting growth. All of a sudden, there's this like wall in our way, and I've been there too. Been there where there's like you get stuck here, and then what do? Is you kind of contract back to where you were.
Hmm.
It's like, so you got the situation where you had three trainers and like two of them quit. And, they said you were a bad leader. So then you just go back to having one trainer and yourself.
Yeah.
And you don't try again because there's a limiting belief that was developed based around that first set of failure versus leaning in and figuring all right, how do I figure this out? How do I figure out how to become a better leader? How do I figure out how to kind of solve this problem? So I think it comes back to that, the facing reality and then figuring it out.
Yeah, I think with that, it's interesting because, I try and use it to, again, going back to kind of like the skill set side of things, people have always done something that they can relate to use a similar skill. And, like what you mentioned there about getting to a certain point and then gravitating back to, maybe yourself and one trainer. It's a little bit like when you first start as a personal trainer, you make mistakes and then you might end up going back into yourself a little bit and saying, oh, I'm not going to do this. Whereas actually you give it a go again, and learn from those mistakes. Do you
Yeah.
think that when it comes to the business side of things, that's where people maybe do hold back or are maybe a little bit scared because they're frightened to make mistakes, they're frightened to give it another go because a little bit like what you mentioned earlier, they don't have that own self-belief in themselves or aren't willing to learn the other skills of how to be a better leader, how to manage a team, how to learn about business.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think that's one of the things with what coaching is really important, right? And having mentors in your life, but also your peer group. Like we have I think 130 something gyms in there. And a lot of times people need to just it's the whole Roger Bannister principle. It's like the Roger Bannister, do you know who Roger Bannister is?
No, I'm not sure. No.
Roger Bannister broke the 4 minute mile. Like
Ah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah,
it,
yeah,
wa- it was said that like nobody can run
yeah,
a 4 minute mile, right? And it's like if you ran a 4 minute mile, like your would explode and your bones would evaporate into the wind,
yeah,
right? That's like what would happen, and people believe that, and so no one did. And then Roger Bannister broke it, and then all of a sudden 10 people the next day broke it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know the exact, right? I don't know what
yeah,
actually it was, but you know what I'm saying? So sometimes like you need a leader. Like when I first started coaching and consulting, I had no idea how to run a company like this. It's definitely different than running a business.
hmm
And the number one thing I did was hire someone there in the UK like you are, right? I hired a business coach that was running a company like I wanted to run.
yeah,
And I said, teach me and show me how to do it. And he had a business like mine for physical therapists. And
mhm,
I could see what was happening. And he showed me his business. I went inside. And I think that's the like surrounding yourself with other business owners is such an important thing. Because a lot of times when you're kind of on that island by yourself, like you don't know what's possible, but sometimes you just need to see what is possible.
yeah, yeah.
And so like being in a group, like we had a guy in our mastermind, he opened up 7 gyms in 2 years.
Wow,
Like no one believed that. And again, that's possible for like venture capital people, right?
yeah,
And Orange Theory can do that easily, right? That unless my, but he was a guy like just to have one gym.
yeah,
And all of a sudden he's like, I'm gonna open more. And he opened 7 in 2 years. And so other guys are seeing that in our group and they're like, wait a minute, like he did 7 in 2 years. I can do another one. I can do another one. I can do three.
yeah.
I can do four. But sometimes it's about who you surround yourself with that's going to help you break out of the limiting beliefs that you actually have. So your peer
Yeah.
group is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is, surround yourself with like-minded people. I think that's important. Even when I know you mentioned, at the start about playing football, that's why teams are, important. Everyone wants to feel a part of something, and in some shape or form, I do believe that everyone is competitive, in some shape or form. So if someone's opening 7 and you've got one, it'd be like, ah, well, yeah, maybe I can do that. Which, again, it goes back to the point that we said,
And I,
being
and
able
I
to
think
move
it's a
forward.
that it's a choice too. Like you can choose to be demoralized by that, or
Yeah.
you can choose to be motivated by it. That guy opened 7 gyms. I'm a piece of shit. I only have one. I don't know what to do to it too. Versus he opened up 7 gyms. I'm gonna do that too.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
that's the difference. It's like, can you see that and be fired up and excited and motivated and inspired by it? Or do you see that and you allow, and that gets back to the personal development stuff that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe there's more work to be done to be able to be motivated by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier, there's always a choice, in terms of, you can see it as a problem and be like, oh, well, actually, I'm just gonna just go back to do what I was doing and just stay there because that's fine. Or, be like, look, well, how can I actually learn how to do this? Like what you mentioned about, seeing your mentor and seeing how they run a business. Because, one phrase that I've used before with people is, you don't know what you don't know. If you don't know how to do that, but then someone shows you, you can be like, all right, okay, well, yeah, I never thought of doing it about that and having a second pair of eyes. Um,
I
with
think you make a good point on the choice thing. I'll just make one point on that. So
Yeah,
last night, my son, he had like a bad day and
yeah,
he was sad. He had a bad thing at school happen. He came home, he wasn't feeling well, and he was all like sad. And I had this thing where I bought him a stopwatch. And whenever he's in one of the funks, and actually we bought this for his jujitsu tournaments because if he lost a match and he had to go do another match, he needed to be able to kind of stop his emotions and then be able to move to the next thing. And
right,
so I handed him the stopwatch and I said, you have a decision right now to how long you want to be sad about this. But then once the time is up, we're done. We're
Yeah.
finished thinking this way. And we're going to move and we're going to think now the positive way. And the point I always try to make is that he has a choice. You have a choice to feel a certain way. You can decide to feel like shit about this, or you can decide to move forward and feel better. And sometimes we need to just give ourselves the time and the space that we need to feel it, but then be decisive on when we are going to change that.
Yeah.
So how long do you want to still feel like crap about yourself that you have one gym and that guy's got five? How much
Yeah.
longer are you going to think versus deciding to now think about it differently?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good that's a good way to think about it and use because especially if you've got that timer there, it's kind of you're wasting time thinking about something but not actually being productive with it. Yeah, I think that's a cool way to think about it. We've spoken about quite a lot there, a couple of tangents thrown in, but the last question that I like to ask Vince from everything that we've spoken about there, and for everyone listening, what would be your take home points or words of wisdom from what we've spoke about today?
Um, I think that the first thing is understanding and just talking to business owners that it's not meant to be easy. It's hard. And it's probably why so few people become business owners is because it is really hard and it requires growth and it requires facing way more problems than most people face. It requires way more emotional stability than most people have the ability to handle. And as hard as that is, that's also what's great about it. What's great about it is this built-in person that you need to become to be able to create this business that you want. It can't be just about the X's and O's of business. It's all about the person and who do you need to become. I think it was Darren Hardy that said this. He basically was, when someone's looking for a spouse, they what they should do is they should write down all the qualities that they want in a spouse. Whatever, they're nice, they're, a good cook, they're whatever, right? And you list them all out. And what you think is, oh, how do I find someone like that? And that's the wrong question. The right question is, who do I need to become to attract a person like that? Right. And I think that's what this business thing is really about. It's like, who do you need to become as a person to be able to create this business that you want? And so I don't talk about this too much on the front end, being
Yeah.
honest. Um, I talk a lot about marketing. I talk a lot about making money, because I do realize that's what most gym owners are looking for.
Hmm.
But when they get into my world, there's only so many business skills I can teach them.
Yeah, yeah,
It's at the end of the day, I told it to you. It's getting clients, keeping clients, building cash. That's it.
yeah, yeah,
That's what you need to do. After that, it becomes who you are and the
yeah, yeah,
skills that you need to develop and the person you need to become. And so we spent a ton of time talking about this stuff inside of our walls because we realize that this is the bottleneck.
yeah.
This is the thing that does get in the way. Um, and so once you have the basic business stuff down, this is the next level.
Yeah, it's a little bit like what you mentioned before. It's how you are as a person, as a leader. That's gonna be that bottleneck. Thanks a lot, Vince, for taking the time to jump on. I think some really, really good, a good take-home point, words of wisdom to finish on, but also some really, really good content and information in there. If anyone has any questions about what we've spoken about today, want to reach out to you or see the content that you put out there, where could people find you or reach you?
Yeah, I'll give you a link to get my new book. I wrote a book called The Ultimate Guide to Small Group Personal Training, which I
Nice.
know that that's a model I think a lot of people that follow you are using. And
Yeah.
so they just go to smallgrouppersonaltraining.com. Maybe put that link in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
and then they can just get a free digital copy of the book at that
Well,
URL. And if they want to, track me down, it's the website vincegabriel.com.
awesome. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Thanks, Steve.